Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. Gothic Remake is just around the corner, and I really hope it's going to be a good game.
Take a guess what my answer is going to depend on.
This remake has the potential to gain a lot of new Gothic fans, so I thought it would be a good idea to make this video. Gothic is a game that doesn't tell you much. You get tossed in this brutal world of criminals, beasts and monsters, and your first goal is to simply not die behind every corner of the map. So I prepared 10 most important things to know about Gothic before you decide to play the remake in order to help you out a little bit. Because I'm a very nice guy, what can I say? Bitch. Let me just say that I will try to avoid spoilers as much as possible, but Gothic is not exactly a game that you can easily spoil by just talking about its features. Even so, I'll try my best to not spoil anything that I would consider to be important to experience by yourself. Anyway, here are top 10 things to know about Gothic before playing the remake. Number 1. Gothic difficulty. Gothic Remake will offer you different difficulty settings before you start the game. This is completely different than the original because Gothic 1 had one single difficulty. I highly suggest sticking with quote-unquote Gothic difficulty because this is supposed to simulate the original experience.
Then you should find yourself a nice spot of sunlight.
You probably heard that Gothic games are not exactly the most beginner-friendly games, to say the least, but you should definitely avoid playing on novice or even messing with these 3 sliders in general. Unless you have a very good reason to do so, which might be a physical disability or similar problems. Gothic games are very rough in the beginning, but overcoming that friction and improving your character is one of the main reasons why these games have a cult-like following. In other words, the character progression is top-notch, you feel stronger with every level up and each better item you get. So I assume that novice difficulty is going to heavily affect that experience, and not in a good way. You probably also want to avoid other difficulty settings like hard or permadeath for obvious reasons. Having a harder difficulty is great news for the old fans of this franchise, but if you're a new player, you want to avoid this as well. I know this is a very polarizing discussion in the community, judging by your comments in my previous videos. But this is just how I personally feel about the game and why I think that most people should stick with Gothic difficulty. I won't try to turn this video into a critique, so if you want to hear me yap about this topic in greater depth, you can check out this video. Now let's move on to number 2. Early game is going to kick your ass. The beginning of this game is going to be very rough for many different reasons, and no matter how skilled you might be as a player, the character you play is not. The remake is more beginner friendly compared to the original game by default, because it won't have the same control scheme. That game was infamous for clunky controls, which I personally think are very intuitive once you figure them out, but still, the majority of people had major issues with how that game controls. Think of it as tank controls from old survival horror games, but you won't have to worry about this in the remake. The remake plays more like your typical third-person action RPG when it comes to fundamental controls like moving around, interacting with the world, and even fighting. Speaking of which, even though Gothic Remake will include some modern combat mechanics like parry and dodge, you simply cannot rely solely on player skill. If perhaps you came into this game as a Souls-like player, you should know that it's literally impossible to beat the game by simply relying on your skill. Maybe some lunatic will try to prove me wrong on this, but the sooner you realize this, the better. This is a huge part of the Gothic experience and one of its biggest role-playing features, I would say. The playable character, also known as the nameless hero, is everything but a hero in the beginning. He can barely hold a sword properly until you invest some learning points from leveling up and increase his skills. Gothic takes its role-playing seriously when it comes to the playable character, and until you improve his skills, yours won't matter that much. You should definitely focus a lot more on talking to people in the beginning than fighting. Which brings us to our next topic. Number 3. Less fighting, more talking. Killing enemies in Gothic gives you a great amount of XP, and this is the way you're going to gain levels much faster than solving quests. However, this is simply not possible to do in the early game, so doing beginner quests should be your main focus. This involves talking to pretty much everyone you can meet in the game and taking as many quests as possible. This game only has a handful of quest markers that will show you what to do and where to go next, but the majority of quests won't tell you anything outside of NPC dialogue. So you have to look around and figure out where to go or where to find the thing you need for the quest. Even though most of these quests can be considered as a bunch of busy work, they are much more fun than your typical fetch quests in other RPGs. You're going to explore the map and learn more about the game in general, even while doing the simplest quests. I mean, sure, the people will try to take the advantage of you, but unlike fighting monsters in the open world, which usually gets you killed, the worst thing that can happen is getting knocked out and robbed. Most of the quests you can do for people in all three camps are very simple, and this should give you enough learning points and currency to jumpstart the character progression. When that finally happens, the game will open up a lot more, allowing you to move through the map with more confidence and less chance of dying behind every corner. Most people in this game are assholes who will try to scam you, beat you up and steal your shit, but you should not worry about that. That's because you will have your chance to get your revenge later on, which is one of the most satisfying things in Gothic.
Sounds like a tricky job.
Number 4. Skills and trainers. When you start leveling up in Gothic Remake, you'll get something called learning points. As the name would suggest, you need to use these learning points to learn new skills and abilities. In order to do that, you'll have to find appropriate trainers first. Like I said before, Gothic takes its role-playing elements seriously, and this is one of those features that just makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I mean, sure, the process of learning these skills from trainers is not super deep. It's actually really simple once you have the currency and learning points to spend. But having to find a proper trainer to teach you these skills instead of just opening up a menu and selecting them is way more immersive. And Gothic is all about being immersive, from having a minimalistic UI, a deep AI schedule system, the music and other similar features. Gothic is truly committed to creating an immersive atmosphere. Hell, that's one of the reasons why such an outdated looking RPG from 2001 still feels way more immersive than most modern RPGs. Even so, it never gets to the point where those immersion elements can be too realistic, which would probably make the game more annoying. Anyway, learning some combat skills in Gothic, like improving the one-handed weapon skill for example, is very important. That's because your character will get completely new combat animations each time you learn the subsequent level of skill with a trainer. This is supposed to simulate the growth of your character as a fighter, but more importantly, the combat itself starts feeling a lot better. At the time of recording this video, I'm still not sure if the combat in the remake is good or not. But if it turns out to be decent at least, the combat should feel drastically better after you increase the skills. Learning new weapon skills in this game is extremely important because you'll have troubles to kill the weakest enemies in the game without some training. But what about magic and range gameplay, C4G? Is that possible in this RPG? Well, I'm glad you asked. Bitch. Hey, I gotta prepare you for this brutal colony of prisoners, man, and being nice is just not gonna cut it.
You'll be sorry for that!
Number 5. Magic and range gameplay. If you like casting spells or using ranged weapons more than being a fighter, well, I have some good and some bad news. The bad news is you'll have to be a melee fighter, at least in the early game. There is simply no way around it, but once you start meeting right NPCs and do some work for one of the factions, you'll be able to start working towards becoming a mage. Even though Gothic doesn't give you much of a choice in the beginning when it comes to playstyles, you can actually become a powerful mage or a ranger later on. So if you prefer to play as a mage in RPGs, it's totally possible and it's very fun in Gothic. It seems very fun in the remake as well, and it's not as static like in the original. You'll be able to move around more while casting some weaker spells, while stronger spells still require you to be stationary. Gothic uses a system called Circles of Magic. There are 6 Circles of Magic in total, but you can only get to that level by following a specific path in the story, which I don't wanna spoil. The 3 factions in the game will restrict how far you can progress within these Circles of Magic, but you'll still be able to learn a lot of cool spells. I'll talk more about the factions and their benefits in one of the next points. Playing as a mage requires a bit more patience and some careful planning with your learning points. It can be very tempting to spend all of your learning points on other combat and non-combat skills, but if you decide to be a mage, you should always try to save at least 10 to 15 learning points for later. I highly recommend this playstyle in Gothic because you probably have a lot of fun once you get it going. You will meet fire and water mages in the Gothic Remake, and the magic spells you get to learn depends on your faction choice. The remake also added some new options for creating your own magical scrolls, so you can actually kickstart your mage playthrough a bit earlier compared to the original. There is a simple side quest that you can take in the old camp and probably other camps as well. Magic scrolls are not the same as magic runes though, because runes are permanent and scrolls are not. Range gameplay with bows and crossbows is more like a secondary playstyle, but you can still be a very powerful ranger. We are not sure if Gothic Remake has some special new abilities for this playstyle, but playing with the bow is definitely different compared to the original. Now you can free aim the bow, while the original game made you use the target lock system. And you can get your bow gameplay going from the very early game, so yeah, Gothic is not only about bonking things with your melee weapons. Number 6. Enemies and their names. Gothic 1 had a surprising amount of different enemy types, especially for such a smaller open world RPG. But it also has a couple of different names for the same creatures, and that's really important to realize, especially in the early game. For example, the young scavenger is way weaker than the regular scavenger. Green Goblin is weaker than the Black Goblin, Basic Lizard is way weaker than the Fire Lizard, and so on, you get the picture. What's even more useful to know about monsters and beasts in Gothic, they will not instantly attack you on sight. Unlike in many RPGs where you instantly aggro enemies when you get into the range, enemies in Gothic will give you a couple of warning signs before attacking. Only when you get really close to them they will attack you without warning. But if you keep your distance, you can usually just walk right past them. Once again, the immersive game design of Gothic was on another level. Speaking of which, the day and night cycle in Gothic will affect enemies as well. NPCs will go to sleep at night even when it comes to animals and beasts, so you can even use this to your advantage to travel more safely. Which brings us to our next topic, which would be the exploration. Gothic's open world is pretty small by today's standards. The remake is going to expand some existing zones and add brand new areas, but this world is still going to be much smaller compared to your typical open world RPG. And this is one of the biggest strengths of Gothic. The map is very vertical, dense, and more importantly, very fun to explore. Even though this map is completely open from the very beginning, the sense of danger in this world will prevent you from wanting to explore everything early on. This should create a sense of mystery as well, and you will be eager to explore those areas when the time comes. Which is another reason why the character progression in Gothic was always so satisfying. This wouldn't be possible without fixed levels for NPCs, which means that everyone has fixed levels in this world, they won't level up with you. Putting that aside, one of the best tips I could give you if you're a new player is to stick with the old camp, at least for the first couple of levels. Even if you don't plan to join this faction, you should definitely do every possible side quest in the first chapter before you move on. You can also explore the vicinity of the old camp as much as possible until you stumble upon some very strong enemies, which is usually a good sign that you went too far. If you want to visit other camps as soon as possible or just in general, here's the best way to do it. The old camp has some NPCs from other camps as well, which can lead you straight to the Brotherhood camp and the new camp. They will also kill everything on the way, and you still get the XP from those kills. These NPCs are not so hard to find, and they stick out quite a bit from other people in the camp because of their armors. So yeah, you should always test your limits when it comes to exploration, but make sure to save the game a lot if you have a cat-like curiosity. Number 8. The story and setting. The story in Gothic Remake probably won't blow you away, but this was never the main point of Gothic. Gothic story features 6 different chapters, and I believe the remake will have the same number of chapters as well, if not more. You can only reach a new chapter when you push the main story forward with quests. Each chapter will respawn some monsters, add new monsters in the old zones, and unlock some new areas. You play as a nameless man on a mission, surrounded by a bunch of prisoners and monsters. It starts off as a story about survival in this brutal magical prison, and it slowly evolves into power fantasy. The goal of the main story is very simple and clear from the very beginning. It's about escaping this place as fast as possible and getting some people to help you. So you will need to pick a side and work with one of the factions in order to escape. Gothic Remake features 3 different factions that you can join. 2 out of 3 factions have an escape plan, and you need to help them complete that plan by doing quests for them. Only the people from the old camp don't have an escape plan because they want to live as comfortable as possible inside the magical barrier. They have the monopoly on the king's ore trade, so it makes sense. If you're not familiar with the story at all, here's a brief synopsis. A king has erected a massive magical dome over ore mines in order to prevent prisoners from escaping. The prisoners mine the magical ore to help fight the losing war against orcs. But the spell for the magical barrier backfired and it trapped the magicians inside along with prisoners. people and objects can safely get in the barrier, but nothing gets out alive. The remake is supposed to fill in some gaps in the story, fix some plot holes, and improve the main story in general, hopefully. It's not like the original story of Gothic wasn't interesting, but it certainly could get a lot better. On the other hand, the setting of Gothic was simply brilliant. It's simple, easy to understand, and very believable, despite the fact that we're talking about fantasy. Light fantasy for sure, but still a fantasy. Number 9. Tale of Three Factions. Your choice of faction will shape your playthrough of Gothic Remake in a major way. Listen, you can join one of these factions only because of the vibes, you should not overthink this choice. But here's everything you should know about all of them if you want to know what you're getting into. The old camp is the easiest choice and the most convenient. This is the first camp that you will explore, and there are many reasons why you should decide to join them. It makes the most sense from the narrative side of things, at least in the early game, but more importantly, there are many gameplay benefits. It's one of the fastest ways of becoming a powerful mage early on, and quite possibly the best option if you want to play as a mage in general. Also, it's the easiest option to pick as a new player, because like I said, it's the most convenient. And I'm pretty sure that most new players will join this camp on their first playthrough anyway. This camp allows you to train the crossbow skill the fastest if you want to try out that playstyle. One of the things that I personally enjoy when playing with this camp is unlocking the access to the castle area of this camp, but some people will disagree. You'll get some special quests in all three factions, and I always thought the one you get from the old camp is the coolest. The new camp has some pretty cool advantages as well. They have the easiest way to progress through the ranks because you only need to reach level 10 to become a mercenary. Other camps require you to do longer quests before you can even join their first rank. The new camp also allows you to train two-handed weapon skill very early in the game with less learning points invested. You can also beat up a lot of people from this camp if you can, and you won't get in trouble like in other camps. Although this can be inconsistent in the original game, so it might work differently in the remake. The new camp also allows you to get a stronger armor a bit earlier than other two camps. Now, take some of this info with a grain of salt, because the remake might change things a little bit, but I would be surprised if they changed them a lot. For example, the original game had many different restrictions when it comes to becoming a mage, depending on the faction you choose. However, the remake is going to have an easier access to circles of magic compared to the original, regardless of your faction choice. And I'm not sure if I like that decision, but I'll leave that for the review. Well, if you want to smoke swamp weed all day, look no further. This camp used to be the fastest way of becoming a mage, which came with some restrictions, but like I said before, it seems like the remake is going to change this. I would be surprised if they changed the max level of magic circles you could reach in this camp. The original game only allowed you to progress until the 4th circle of magic if you joined the Brotherhood. Even so, this was more than enough to play as a powerful mage, and the remake is supposed to include a bit more spells in general. You'll get some very strong and very cool looking armor sets if you join the Brotherhood, and the quick access to two-handed skill trainers for less learning points. The first time I joined this camp was for the best looking Templar armor set. I thought it looks the coolest. No matter which faction you decide to join, I strongly recommend doing as much quest as possible and explore all areas that you can handle before joining one of the camps. To sum it up, the old camp has a superiority complex and it's a no-brainer to join. The new camp is building a bomb to blow up the barrier, and the Brotherhood is smoking swamp weed all day and praying to a god called the Sleeper who is supposed to save them. Make your choice. Number 10. The Nameless Hero.
Sounds like a tricky job.
I heard he's dead.
What's in it for me?
Here are a few things that are important to understand about the character you play in Gothic. He doesn't have a name, or at least he never gets to say it. You don't get to customize how he looks, there is no character creation screen or anything similar to that. The playable character in Gothic Remake, also known as the Nameless Hero, is almost a blank character with no background. You will get some light context in some dialogue with NPCs, but not much. He certainly has some personality, but he's nowhere near close to being a predetermined character. The game will let you shape his personality with choices you can make, but the game doesn't have a karma system or anything similar. So there is no system which tracks the decisions you make, which could affect the story and gameplay. This might feel weird at first, because the majority of RPGs either give you a totally blank character with some background story that you can select, or a fully fledged predetermined character. The Nameless Hero is somewhere in between, which also creates a mystery behind his character. Why did he end up in the jail in the first place, or what crime he committed? Nobody knows. Some info that you can find about the game claims that he was innocent, while the info from other Gothic games said he committed a minor crime. Whatever the case might be, you can do good and evil things in the game, and it's all up to you to make some of these choices. And even when you do things which can be considered as pure evil, you will rarely suffer any consequences. After all, you're in a prison, and most people won't care if you beat someone up, rob them, or even kill them. And they will gladly give you the same treatment. I always thought this character is a great protagonist because he's not exactly your typical RPG playable character, and the mystery that surrounds him is still very strong, even after 25 years.
If there's a way out of here, I'll find it.
And those will be the top 10 things you should know about Gothic before playing the remake. Tell me, is there something that you would like to add in the comments down below? Maybe something that the new players should know about that I haven't mentioned in the video. Be sure to stick around for my review about the game and some more content, probably if I end up enjoying the game. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.